So, the battles are fought in the cage and the wars are fought in the boardroom, especially when it comes to the streaming wars, which are heating up between Netflix, Disney, and the surrounding companies that have platforms. Disney, just the other day, just yesterday, announced that they are going to be launching the ESPN direct to consumer platform on August 21st, and also announced that within that package, WWE premium products are going to air. That is in addition to the WWE properties that air on Netflix. So, what does that mean for the UFC and MMA? Well, it's a little early to tell just yet because they have not announced anything, but there are a couple of different possibilities here. One would be that ESPN keeps the UFC property and all of its peripherals, because that's what you have to consider when it comes to the UFC, is that it's not only the fight nights or pay-per-views, but also all of the surrounding content as well, such as the Ultimate Fighter and the Contender Series, the Embedded Series, and things like that that air on ESPN properties. So it could be that ESPN keeps all of that because the ESPN Plus service is also going to be absorbed by the ESPN direct-to-consumer app, which is going to be $30 a month, by the way. Kind of a big point to note in all of this. So ESPN keeps the UFC and you pay $30 a month. What also could happen and would be absolutely terrible would be if ESPN keeps fight nights and surrounding content and someone like Netflix gets numbered events like the pay-per-views or any other premium branded UFC content, generally going to be pay-per-views. They could keep the pay-per-view model that way and have it be just pay-per-views on an external service, so you can get the pay-per-view from that service without having a subscription, or you could have to have a subscription to that service, or you could have to have a subscription to that service and still pay for a pay-per-view, and have all of your other UFC content on some other platform. So those options don't sound great. Now, of course, WWE is a TKO Holdings property, just like the UFC is. And that could mean that there are more advanced talks happening with ESPN to make sure that the UFC stays within their umbrella. Because what's happening in the streaming wars right now is that they're going away from having products shared amongst the services. They want to have the product that you are consuming only be exclusive to their service. They're trying to consolidate and separate from each other. So Netflix products are Netflix products. UFC and things like that could, potentially become that, but wherever it ends up, they want to keep it within that umbrella. Disney wants all of Disney to be itself. That's why Disney is getting rid of the Hulu brand as well. Another big thing from all of this. Disney is absorbing Hulu into Disney Plus. So all of these things are boding rather ominously for MMA fans, unless the UFC goes away from the pay-per-view model. But even still, if they split up fight nights and pay-per-views, then potentially you might be paying the fee for ESPN and the fee for whatever other platform gets it, presumably Netflix. So either way here, it is looking like it is going to cost a lot more to be an MMA fan very soon. That's not even including any of the outside things, the outside properties that you might want to consume in the MMA space, like the PFL and One Championship and Ryzen and other promotions. So there might be an external thing that's needed for those. There currently is, as is now. UFC in all of this is just one small piece of a much larger puzzle, and the sports wing of Disney, with ESPN as the face, is consolidating so much into it. They announced that they have inked a new deal with the NFL that's going to have their relationship tightened up closer. I think the NFL actually is owning a portion of ESPN now to strengthen that bond. The other sports organizations that are large in this country, the major sports organizations, are also tethered to ESPN to some extent. I think most of them are. Disney just purchased a smaller streamer called Fubo recently that does, I guess, external, smaller, more fringe sports. So there's a lot of glomming up of the sports content through Disney, and Netflix is trying to play catch up a little bit with that with things like WWE. But will they have a portion of the UFC property? We don't know. But like I said, you could end up with something where you have to have two streaming services in order to consume the product completely. And if they keep the pay-per-view model, you might need to pay a premium on top of that in order to get that. So right now is just a very unfortunate time for being a fan of mixed martial arts at the highest levels, because we don't know exactly what's going to happen yet. That's why I'm not doing a whole deep in-depth dive on this subject just yet. I just wanted to put something out real quick to just cover it briefly until we know exactly what it's going to be. But there conceivably could be a time where you have to pay $30 for ESPN to get your fight nights. You have to pay whatever Netflix's fees are, $20 a month or $12 or whatever their tiered thing is. So if you have the highest tier without ads, it's, whatever that costs. Let's say that you do have the ads. So, $30 for ESPN. I think it's 15 or 12 or something for the with ads version of Netflix. So $45 a month just at base level, and then potentially pay-per-view fees on top of that. So that would be very wild if that is the case. Unfortunate, and it would signal to me that there might be some elements of monopoly going on with Disney when it comes to glomming up all of the sports-related content that they are latching onto for this new ESPN app and offering. But of course, with the current political climate, there is very little that will be done in that regard as far as breaking it up, I would suspect. So just be prepared, basically. I just wanted to put something out really quick to let everybody know that very soon it could be a lot more expensive to be an MMA fan than it already was. Of course, that lends to piracy, which is how many fans already watch the product. So I don't know if the companies involved in these dealings are just going to be okay with that, or there might be enhanced anti-piracy measures being taken there as well. Pirates will always find a way around that. That is the nature of piracy. But there could be something even further to try to block that. And if that is the case, then it might be harder to make that a thing and make it a possibility. So I would suspect that coming very soon, you could be seeing some major increases in the amount that you have to pay if you do want to consume all of the UFC's properties. This also calls into question how Fight Pass is involved with all of this, or where it will fall in the landscape of all of this, because Fight Pass has been a reliable outlet to get just the UFC property and then still pay the pay-per-view cost. But if they eliminate the pay-per-view model, does Fight Pass, stay in the mix for fight nights and things like that? Because if the fight nights end up being a property that is one part of a multi-part spread out landscape of content for the UFC, then perhaps it doesn't make sense for them to charge X amount of dollars for Fight Pass when it's wrapped up in the ESPN app. They can just make Fight Pass part of the ESPN app and do away with it altogether. Then the entire UFC catalog and Pride and all the other things that they own from previous years that are currently available on Fight Pass become part of ESPN. So you have to pay for that. There are a lot of possibilities as to how all of this shakes out and how the content is dispersed now. But with the streaming wars heating up the way that they have been, and Disney making power moves to try to compete with Netflix, because they are the two largest and most top of the heap when it comes to this landscape, it would just seem that what they are doing is very bad for fight fans, specifically. For general entertainment fans, I would say also pretty bad, but for the general consuming public, not great, because you are getting less options. You're consolidating the power between these couple of companies, and less competition means less quality for the consumer, because you only have these options to choose from. So you're going to pick one and you're going to like it. Or in our case, in the case of the WWE fan base, you're going to take these two and you're going to like that. Because this is already being rolled out for them, or has been rolled out for them, with Netflix having Monday Night Raw, and now ESPN getting WrestleMania and other premium offerings. However, all that said, the one good thing that could come out of this for people who are paying for the product already is the elimination of the pay-per-view model altogether. Because if they took away the pay-per-view aspect of consuming the UFC product, then you might end up getting away with a $30 ESPN package and a $15 Netflix package, getting all of the UFC content between the two, and then that being $45 a month, which would end up being less than the $15 or whatever it ended up being, $17 I think for ESPN Plus currently, plus pay-per-view fees on top of it. So that is one possibility that could end up being somewhat cheaper for fans, but I don't know if that's going to happen, because why take away a potential revenue source in the pay-per-view when you could just jack up the prices even more and keep getting pay-per-view money for the people who are actually going to pay for it. So just wanted to put a quick video out there to say that things are going to be a lot more expensive. So get ready to shell out some more dollars. Hope your parlays hit. For yelling about mixed martial arts, this is Thinker St. James. Like and subscribe.
St. James.